Hello everyone, my name is Edward Ramirez. I teach diesel technology here at St. Philip's College, and I'd like to introduce you to the Kenworth vehicle. So with this Kenworth vehicle, we're just going to do a real quick walk around. So you can see here, we've got the diesel engine, it's a Cummins ISX 15 model engine, okay? When you're doing the walk around the engine, the operator's required to check the oil level. It's a daily pre-delivery check or pre-operative check, okay? He has to check the tires, the PSI on the tires. Make sure that the tires are lubed properly. This particular tire is a 285, 175, 24.5, so the tire is 24.5 inches. You want to look for loose lug nuts. And while you're in here in the cargo area for the engine bay, you want to check the drive shaft with the steering. You want to check, see if you got any loose steering. You want to look at the Pitman arm. You want to look for any power steering leaks. This is the power steering reservoir. Also, when you're in the engine bay, in the compartment, you want to check the fan clutch. If this spins freely, it's going to tell you the clutch is bad. You have a serpentine belt in there. You've got a data plate up there on top of the engine that'll give you the model of the engine. It'll also give you the horsepower. Another thing you want to look at is the air breather. The air filter is serviceable. That one up there says it was serviced 2018, so it needs servicing for sure. Okay, so I've talked about the steering, talked about the wheel. You also have a primary and a secondary fuel filters. These are located right here, primary and secondary. Okay, you have a common rail fuel system with this Cummins ISX engine. So say you're a technician and you're working on servicing out this vehicle. These filters get serviced with an electric fuel pump. The electric fuel pump needs to run for maybe 10, 15 seconds to prime the system. This has an electric fuel pump, and with the electric fuel pump, all you have to do is turn the ignition switch. Cummins has an electric fuel pump, and it'll fill up these fuel filters with fuel. Now, some manufacturers recommend that you put fuel in the filter, but it's got to be clean, fresh fuel. If you use the electric fuel pump, they're going to get full of fuel automatically when you turn that key with the ignition. I don't know if you can see this here, but there's also a remote lube down here at the bottom. Those grease fittings are automatically lubed just by servicing them down here. You add the fluid in the filter. So I'm going to move over here to the battery. So as an operator, you have to check the battery system. You want to make sure that these connections are tight, that they're secure, that you don't have any corrosion, right? And this is a 12-volt battery system. A 12-volt system. You notice it's got two batteries in there. In the old days, they had 24-volt system, but all the vehicles that we have here in the shop are 12-volt system. It also has an engine heater here. You can plug that in, say if you were up north and you want to preheat the engine coolant. Maybe the temperature out there is freezing. You have the fuel capacity here, right? For diesel fuel, and it says it meets all FHWA requirements. And inside the cab, we'll go inside the cab in just a minute. We're going to complete our walk around. You want to check the footing, the step. Get up there, make sure it's secure. You want to make sure all your guardrails. You can look at your mirrors, make sure your mirror is secure. One of the important aspects of the diesel engine and the diesel tractor actually is the braking system. Now that drum braking system You can see this lining, the brake lining. This here is your brake drum. Brake lining. This shows to have a lot of lining on it. Looks to be in good shape. But you also want to look in here for heat stress cracks. It's real important that you do a real good inspection on the brake lining whenever you're doing a preventive maintenance inspection. You'll also notice this airbag. It's a bellows. It's a bellows type airbag. You have your shock absorber. You've got the differential here, the pumpkin, the rear differential. And then here, you can see the piggyback brake chamber, okay? This brake chamber has two diaphragms in it. One is for the spring brake, and the other is for the service brake. The spring brake is non-serviceable. That's this one right here, this black band. And the service brake, you can see it's got this clamp. It can actually be opened up and replaced. You can replace that diaphragm. Now this component here is the ASA, automatic slack adjuster. You notice you've got a grease fitting here that you can service, okay? And you want to make sure that this, when the service brake is applied, this chamber or this automatic slack adjuster reaches 90 degrees. If it's more than 90 degrees or less than 90 degrees, you're not going to get the appropriate braking action. Over here on this other side, you get another ASA. Here is where you would, if you had to, you could adjust that automatic slack adjuster. But these are automatically adjusted slack adjusters. These are called spring brake. ASA spring brakes. Brake lining. Look for cracks on the drum, the percentage of your lining, and you annotate that on your preventive maintenance inspection document. But right now we're just doing a walk around. Okay? You certainly want to look at all of these bushings for these torque rods. These are your torque rods. Make sure that this is in good shape. Then of course, we've got the fifth wheel. Here, we have the leveling valve for the suspension system. Many times you can have leaks in your air brake system or your air system, and the vehicle will not reach the fully charged capacity. This one has a new leveling valve. You certainly want to check your tires. Once again, you want to check the tire, the size, make sure that the tires match. Check your lugs. If you have any lugs that show rust, they could be loose. You want to check the torque settings on those. And you also want to check the air pressure. You want to check for any cracks that may be on the tire itself. Just want to walk around on the vehicle. You can notice that it's got a air brake valve here, a check valve, another bellows for the air suspension system, a bellows here for the air suspension system. Got torque rods down here. Those are all components that you're checking. You want to check these bushings. Make sure that they're in good shape because they will cause wear to your tires. We've got another bellows here for the air suspension system. And then they call this the catwalk. You can get up there and inspect that catwalk. Make sure that everything is secure. You've got the exhaust system. And notice those cables. Look at the electrical cable. This electrical cable is frayed, it's damaged. The blue would be for your service brake. The red is for emergency. And these here are called glad hands. You want to check the rubber grommet on your glad hand. Okay? You want to check the electric plug. When that gets plugged into your trailer, it works the lighting and the air pressure. You can see the exhaust stack. You want to make sure there's no looseness, maybe no corrosion on the exhaust stack. Make sure that it's in good shape. Okay? You can see the drive shaft. You can see the U-joints. You can see the grease fittings where you have to service that drive shaft. It's a two-piece drive shaft, and it goes into the intermediate differential, and then there's another drive shaft for that rear differential. So this would make this vehicle a 6x4. Here we have air tanks. You can pull this rod, and when it's functioning properly, you can release the air pressure. The operator needs to do that daily. It's called a petcock. Now I talked about these spring brake chambers. Okay? In here is where the caging tool would go to cage that spring brake. You may need to do that someday. Do you know how to do that? Spring brakes, the spring brake caging tool. When we come over to the other side of the vehicle, we have, this is called a dual fuel tank. You got two fuel tanks. Check the rearview mirror. Check the keys, where the key goes in. Make sure the vehicle locks with the key, and opens with the key. And then we're over on the opposite side of the vehicle, on the passenger side. Look at your turbocharger. Look at your wastegate, the valve. Look at your exhaust system. Look at all these components that attach that turbocharger to the engine. You've got an oil filter located right there. You've got the alternator. In this case, this alternator is a Delco Remy. Okay. You've got the air conditioning compressor. And then up on top, you have the reservoir to service the coolant reservoir, where you add antifreeze, whether it's ethylene glycol or propylene glycol. This is all the outside the engine area. Up at the very, very top, You want to inspect those wiper blades. You want to make sure they're not torn. Make sure that they're not coming apart. Then you want to check the clearance lighting. Make sure that all the lights work. Tail lights, turn signals, clearance lamp, wipers work. Everything here is functional. As you're inspecting the engine, make sure that any leaks, coolant leaks, oil leaks. For our case right here, I see a real small oil leak down in here. You have a filter here for the air system, right? The Bendix filter. Here we have a spring brake chamber, our slack adjuster, the adjustment for the slack adjuster. I would say that this wheel here is out of adjustment because it's rotating too freely. You should hear a slight drag. We have it jacked up in the air. This diaphragm here is serviceable. You hear an air leak coming out of here, you can replace that diaphragm. Just taking this clamp off, replacing the rubber diaphragm in there. You can buy those diaphragms in Amazon for like $11.99. So they're available. When you're looking at your suspension, you want to look at your U-bolts. Make sure that those U-bolts are torqued, that they're tight. If they show conditions of rust, that means that maybe the U-bolt is loose. You've got that bracket up there at the front for the spring shackle. And then you've got the spring shackle in the back. I mean, it's got grease fittings on those pins. You lube that. So now I'm going to move into the cab area. Okay, so in this cab area, as you're sitting in the operator's seat, you want to look at all of your gauges, all of your instrument gauges, your voltage, your water temperature, oil pressure. This tachometer gauge shows to be stuck on about 400 RPM. You've got air pressure gauges. They're dual type gauges. Fuel gauge. You want to make sure that all those gauges are functional. So this is important here. If you can see this, right down here, the yellow one is for the parking brake. The red one is for the trailer brake. Okay? This parking brake, you cannot release it until you have a minimum of 60 psi in your air tanks. Okay? It's a standard transmission. So you would do a run up, make sure that all of your gauges are functioning. Check your turn signals, check your lighting. You're checking all your instruments. You're running the air conditioner and make sure that the air conditioning is functional. Make sure that it operates. Make sure that all your gauges read operating temperature and that your air pressure reaches the appropriate temperature and that those brakes release. You want to check the horn. If it's got an electric horn, you work that. It's got an air horn. You want to pull on that. Make sure that the air horn works. Lighting, air conditioning, turn signals, wipers, all of that is part of your inspection. When you're up here, you want to work the turn signals and the clearance lamps. So another thing you need to check is your free travel on your clutch. You measure that free travel on the clutch from the top of that pedal to there with the tape measure or steel rule. This return spring's not coming back all the way. But you measure that free travel for your clutch. That is your free travel there. For this particular vehicle model, it's 1.5 inches to 2 inches of free travel. If you don't have that free travel, you need to adjust that from underneath the vehicle on this particular model. That is your free travel. You do that underneath the vehicle. I'll get up under there and show you just a minute.